my cousin goes there, and next thing you know, I'm in 11th grade, and they bring him back in a body bag. He was like 6'2", and they bring a bag like this big with his body parts. At that moment, just like when I was in the morgue and that hit me, I was like, I don't think I want to be here.
Dr. Hamid Nassery, welcome to the It's Not That Deep podcast, boss.
Thank you for having me.
It's really nice to have you on the show. For those who don't know, you are a practicing dentist for over 30 years. You're the founder of Real Smile Dentistry that has multiple locations here in Miami. You're a father, husband, and a client of ours as well, which kind of reminds me you're something of an influencer now too. Since we started working together, you've gained a little bit of online notoriety. So that's got to be special.
That's new to me. So.
It's great to have you on the show, boss. I have to say, I have so much respect for you, your business and everything that you've done, and your approach. You take a very different approach than anyone I've ever met to an otherwise pretty cookie cutter industry. A lot of people are doing things very similar and kind of copying each other and fighting for kind of the same customers.
Correct.
But what you've done is taken an approach of, incorporating the physiology and the lifestyle and a whole total holistic approach when looking at a patient, as opposed to just looking inside someone's mouth and how their teeth look. And we're going to dive into all of that today on this podcast, but I want to kind of start at the beginning. How did you even get into this? Because I know you have kind of an interesting story of your origins.
So how did I get into what, dentistry?
Into dentistry, escaping to a different country and all that stuff.
The quick, short version of the story is that I finished 8th grade in back home in Iran. This was 1979. It was at the same time when the revolution was happening, or what they called the revolution. And there was a period of couple of years of real transition that nobody was in power. It was really great freedom, actually. It was, I was reading crazy books. For an 8th grader, I was reading Marx and I read the biography of Martin Luther King and all these books I see on the side of the streets they're selling. I was like, wow, what is this? Let me see this, let me see that. So, it just kind of set a different tone in my mind. And then, but by 1981, the Gulf War started, our war, Iraq attacked Iran, and here I was, in 10th grade going to 11th grade. We were in the capital and kind of away from us, so it wasn't as palpable for us as it was down south. Even though my father's business had gotten affected. My father's from down south, that region, and his business, which was construction, was there, and that got affected because they came and took all his equipment. He had bulldozers and road building equipment, and all that was taken or bombed. And of course, there was no work, so he was up in capital in Tehran with us. But what really got it real for me was when my older cousin, who was 4 years older than me, he had finished high school, and at that point there was nothing. You couldn't get your diploma, you couldn't get married, you couldn't open a business, you couldn't go to college or anything unless you listed for Army.
Wow, so you had to, it was mandatory.
The only road in front of you was going to the Army because we needed people. And those first few years of the war, a lot of people don't realize, but when the revolution happened, these guys came in, they killed all the generals. And they killed all the top pilots, or anybody that skipped. So we had all these F-14s sitting on the ground, nobody could fly it. And if they did, we didn't have the spare parts for it. So effectively, we just had people. And they were doing World War I human wave against, top-notch, military guns and ammunition on Iraqi side, which all the Western nations were helping, from Germany to the United States, United States.
I didn't even know that. That's
yeah,
crazy.
the United States was giving them,
Weapons and everything.
not only weapons, but also satellite positioning of our troops and all that. Germany was selling them chemical weapons that we're using on Iran. So anyways, these I don't want to get into the politics of it, but my cousin goes there and next thing you know, I'm in 11th grade and they bring him back in a body bag. He was like 6'2", and they bring a bag like this big with his body parts. And that moment, just like when I was in the morgue and that hit me, I was like, I don't think I want to be here.
Yeah.
So I just told my dad, listen, I don't know how, but I'm not going to stay here for this. I'm going to try to find a way out. And he was like, yeah, don't worry, it's gonna go away. It's gonna be this, it's gonna be that. And so I started looking, and first thing I realized is that I don't have a passport. I skipped school one day, went to the passport agency and tried to apply, and the guy's like, how old are you? I'm like 14. He's like, go come back with your parent. And I said, okay, give me the paperwork. So I got the paperwork, I went home, waited for that. At that point, since he couldn't work, he had bought a farm outside of the city, so he would go for maybe a week or 10 days at a time. So I waited for him to come back, and I said, okay, can't go back until you take me and get my passport. So finally he went and got it, and I'm like, why don't you apply for everybody? He's like, no, don't worry, we're gonna get it. A month after I got my passport, they closed the passport agency. No more passports were issued for the next 5 years.
Wow.
So I ended up being the only one in the family who actually had a passport. So the next order of things was, how the hell we're going to get out of there, because the borders were closed, especially for young men. So I was talking to a couple other friends of mine on the street, and their parents were physicians and more
well off.
Well, I don't know, well off, but they were more familiar with things outside. My family had never, exited the country. They had gone back and forth. They had family members out. And so they said, listen, you know what? My dad, one of them said, hey, my dad they're looking into getting some smugglers, and they're going to smuggle us through the border to Turkey. I said, hey, listen, whatever it is, sign me up. I'm going with you guys.
Okay.
And I just got my dad to go there, have a meeting with their dads, and just we set it up. And all of a sudden, one day, in the summer of '82, we got in the car. We drove to the northwest part of Iran, and there was a guy there with another 15 people waiting with a bunch of mules and donkeys. And they're like, okay, you get out of the car, we get on this.
Wow.
And like around 5 o'clock in the afternoon, we got on and we started going up this mountain range. And the next morning, and the whole night we were going over the actual border. And I remember, it was pitch dark, of course, in the middle of nowhere, mountain. You can see all the stars, and you see these eyes that coming around us, and these wolves, and these guys that are around us, the smugglers are taking around. They have these long sticks. They have machine guns, but they don't want to shoot them. But they just
Yeah.
and we're just, 3 15-year-old kids with a bunch of other families, and we're just making jokes and laughing. You got to do that stuff when you're like that age, because you're stupid and you don't think anything bad that's going to happen to you. Now that I'm thinking, I'm like, holy shit, I would never let my kids go. but so we cross the river. We had to get off and cross this river, of course, ice cold in the middle of the mountain, and then you see the guardhouse, and it's like, okay, that's the guardhouse. We're going to go around them, and then we're going to keep going. So we go around and like around 6:30, 7 o'clock in the morning next day, we get to this, and he keeps showing us that light. We have to get to that light, and we're just dying. It's 12 hours. We're just walking, and he shows us that light. That's where we want to go, and we finally get to the light, and it is just this 2-room house on top of the mountain. It's on the Turkey side, and there's this really simple farm guy up there with his family. One room is for him, his family. The other room is for the cows. And we go inside there, and we just sit down and we just pass out. And they send to the city, and they bring like 3 or 4 cars to get us all on. And
Crazy.
And we just get on the car, and we go to, I think the biggest city there around there was Erzurum. And we go there, and so they picked us up around 10 a.m. and we get there around 12:30, 1 o'clock. And we eat something, and everybody separates. At that point, we separate. One of the guys that was with me, his uncle had sent, or basically they sent us with these other 3 people. They were older than us, 2 guys and a female. And we were like 15 and a half, and these guys were like in their late 20s, maybe a 30-year-old. And so they were like supposedly, watching out for us. And so we get into a bus with them, and now we start trekking. I don't know if you've looked at the map of Turkey. It looks like a long rectangle. So we're on this end, on the easternmost part, most eastern, and then we're trekking through all the way to the other side. We were trying to go to Istanbul or Ankara at that point. First to Ankara. So, and I see this guy, I'm sitting next to one of the guys, and I tell you, the guy keeps going like this and going like this, and the whole time I'm like, why is he keep doing this? So finally, and have you guys ever been to Turkey?
I have not,
No?
but it's high up on my list.
Yeah, it's just really cool, very good people, excellent food, fruits, best fruits in the world. But man, don't ever get in the bus, because every half an hour they want to stop for tea, chai, let's have chai.
Reminds me of India.
Jesus Christ, just let's go, man.
I know those long bus journeys in India. I've done so many of those.
It's the funniest thing. So every time we're like, oh man, let's just keep going. So they stop. So one of the stops, this guy gets up and he takes his jacket off, and all of a sudden I see on his shirt, he has all these blood lines all over his back. And then we come to find out that they had just escaped that guy from the political prison, and he had all these lashes on his back that were bleeding. That's why he couldn't sit straight on the bus, poor guy. And I'm like, shit, if they had caught us, they would have thought we were political also. That would have been. So anyway, we get to Ankara, and this is one of the funniest and one of the scariest parts. So we finally get 7 a.m. the next morning, we get to Ankara. And one of those guys, they're like, okay, you guys wait here in this park. We're going to go and find a hotel so that, we got to talk to them, make sure they don't call the police, because we didn't have any entry visa, obviously. So they come back an hour later, oh yeah, we found a hotel, and they promised us they're not gonna check.
No issues.
They're not gonna call the police or anything. So my friends and I, we get a room, and they get a room, and then I go take a shower right away. My other buddy takes a shower, and then the third one is in the shower, and all of a sudden we see, boom, they kick the door open, and 3 guys, big guys coming in with guns, and then we're like, oh shit.
Was it police?
No.
Who came in with
They
guns?
didn't lie. They didn't call the police. They called the Secret Service.
Oh my God. Damn.
But in hindsight, it was a lucky thing. So my friend comes out of the shower with a towel, and the only thing, mind of 15-year-old, we're like looking at him, man, you're fucked. They saw you naked. You're gonna go get it. You're getting it. We had just watched, have you ever seen Midnight Train?
No, I haven't, but I've heard of it.
That was classical movie back in the 80s. We had all watched that movie. We're like, oh, they're gonna midnight train you, man. So they take us. At that point, it's like 10 o'clock. Again, they take us, with no rest. We're going to the station, and they interrogate us for 3-4 hours, and so basically they thought we're Armenian terrorists.
Okay.
That's what they were afraid of.
Okay.
So they see my name. My name is obviously very Islamic. One of my friends, his last name is actually sounds very Armenian. But lucky for us, when he was leaving, he didn't know, but his grandmother just slipped like a small, one of these small Quran, the holy book, in his backpack. So as they were like shaking it, all of a sudden they see that thing fall off, and they're like, oh, okay, they believe that we were Muslims. We were like, listen, we're just traveling through. We don't want to stay here. We don't want any trouble. And that's where we got lucky, because Secret Service, they didn't really want to deal with this kind of bullshit.
Yeah, it's not worth their time. They got bigger fish to fry. Than a couple of 15-year-olds.
You know what? Just get the hell out of town and don't come back here. Get to Istanbul. Nobody gonna know. We don't want the paperwork, basically. If it were the regular police, we would have been taken to the jail, and they would have processed us. They'd probably send us back, and then we would have been in big trouble in Iran. So they send an agent with us. They put us back on the bus again, and we're like, And again, we start. So 2 o'clock in the afternoon, we start, and 9 o'clock the next day, 9 p.m. the next day, we get to Istanbul. Imagine how long we're in this bus with half-hour tea breaks. It's like we're just. I didn't want to see another bus the rest of my life. So once we get there, we kind of like blended with the rest of the tourists. And after being there for a couple of weeks, we figured out that the only chance we had, the only choice we had, was to really just go to Spain. They didn't require any visa, so we bought tickets for Spain, and we waited like half hour before our flight, and we went to the line.
Wow, so Spain did not need a visa?
No, at that point. I mean, it's still up to now, I think, because their tourism is their number one economy. So you can enter in there, and they automatically give you, at least at that point, a 3-month visitor's visa.
Cool.
And then if you wanted to stay, you just go and renew it.
Yeah.
So we just got in, and then we went right to the line, and then the officer was like looking over back and forth, trying to find the entry visa. But then the airplane is lifting, and we're like, listen, we just want to get out. So they just stamped us like, get the hell out of here. And,
wow, so much like luck.
Yeah, right.
In this process,
Sure.
Yeah.
So I mean, that's part of I think anything. I personally, I don't know if I would call it luck. I think luck is when preparedness coincides with opportunity. You get ready, you set some things up, and you just wait for that opportunity to happen. I think too much credit is given or not given, or too many excuses. I'm not a lucky person, and I'm,
Yeah, people use it to justify their situation a little bit too much.
In reality, when you look at people who do something, it's always because they had been trying, and they had been prepared, or they have these qualifications and then all of a sudden an opportunity finally comes up, and then they say, oh man, he got lucky. Nobody looks at everything that went into that.
Yeah.
To get that.
Yeah, they make themselves, they make it easy for luck to happen to them because they did all the things.
Right. I think all of us, we get opportunities.
Yeah. I mean, look, you had the foresight at age 14 to know that I gotta get a passport. Like that alone, this whole trip doesn't happen if you don't see that above your whole family. They didn't even see it. Right. So that that goes hand in hand with kind of what you were just saying. So to summarize, you leave Iran, you go through Turkey, you end up in Spain.
Yeah. So
how does that result in you, going into the dentistry field? Like, what's the jump there now?
well, I think we have a joke in Iran and say as soon as the baby is born, and they come out and they bang them. Okay, what are you going to be? A doctor,
lawyer,
or an
engineer.
Yeah, it's like so. It comes from the fact that hardship and a difficult life. They always know that if you have some sort of health professional or engineer, you get to have a comfortable and decent life. Maybe not break all the banks, but you always have bread on the table, right?
Yeah.
So that was in my mind that, okay, I'm going to go to medicine until when I got to Boston, and of course I finished high school in Boston. And then at that point I was trying to decide, so I started undergraduate. I was studying chemistry. My major was chemistry. I loved chemistry, and I thrived in it. And I studied but exactly 2.5 years. I had like 72 credits, but it was all sciences. There was no poetry or psychology 101.
No arts.
None of that stuff. So it was like solid, complete prerequisite for either medical school or dental school. And concurrently, I was working in the hospital in the pharmacy. And just being in the hospital environment, honestly, I didn't like it. It was very depressing for me. It's I was a pharmacy tech, so I would answer the phones from the floors, and they would call and say, "Oh, discontinue the meds for patient so and so. They expired." I'm like, expired? Patient expired? Like a carton of milk expired. I don't ever want to tell anybody that your mom expired. Your dad expired, your son expired.
That's cold.
It's very cold. So it just so happens where I was working in Boston. Boston U dental school was on one side and medical school on one side. So one day it was like at lunchtime, let me go and take a look and see what they're doing in dental school. And I go there and I start watching and I see the students carving stuff and working by hands. And I say, wow, that's pretty good. I love working with my hands. I always drew. I always made sculpture. I love woodwork. I make different things. I've made jewelry and stuff like that. So I was like, wow, this is kind of nice mix. And
you get your chemistry, with like the labs,
the biomaterials,
doing that type of stuff, and then
it's like a creative process. Mm-hmm. To me, it's very much, a creative process where you build something. You're doing, an art that's functional. Right? Mm-hmm. It doesn't just sit on the wall. It's in somebody's mouth and they're using it all day.
Yeah, so that's a very unique perspective. I've never heard someone say that.
It's a functional art. So that really attracted me, and that I said, so I applied. And even though I didn't have my undergrad degree, but I had a good GPA, and Boston U accepted me. So it was a early acceptance, and I said, okay, perfect. And so I started there. All the other stuff came later. The physiologic thought process and all that is just the way, I think my dad sort of like, I told you my dad was a contractor and he was a builder, and he always, whatever he did, he would try to figure out why either a structure fails or how to fix it or how to build something. He would always teach me how to, over-engineer things. Yeah, so if a building called for, let's say, a metal bar of X size, he would say, I'm going to go a little bit bigger just to make sure that this thing doesn't fail. Yeah. So that kind of like got me to think about the same way how we do, how we practice dentistry.
Got you. So where I really want to kind of take the podcast, and for listeners and anyone like listening, dentistry, we could sit here for hours, and I'm sure I could let you dive into the different procedures that you do. Exactly. If I get you going, I feel like we'll go so deep. And this podcast is called It's Not That Deep.
That deep,
So
right.
I want to give people kind of a high level, breakdown on kind of your philosophy with all of this. Now, for anybody listening to this podcast, first of all, you have to go follow Dr. Nassery on TikTok. We'll link all of this stuff and all his socials. And I'm not just saying that because he's a client of ours, but everybody I talk to and everybody that's seen his content is like, oh my God, this is amazing. And that's because the approach that you take to things, it starts at the breathing level, at the posture level, at the how's your sleep, how's your quality of life, what lifestyle choices are you making, all these types of things. And you're touching on, you're not just making people feel bad about like their choices and stuff, but you're giving them practical, here's what you can do about it.
Correct.
Right? So that's kind of where I wanted to start is, what made you interested in kind of the physiology of dentistry to begin with?
So it's always, there's always a story, of course, to everything, right? So here I was, this was early 90s, I moved here and I was in a pretty nice practice, well-known practice. My partner had been in there for some 20, 25 years at that point. And I was doing a lot of cosmetic work. And, I take my work very personal and, of course, the majority of them very successful, very happy patients. But there were like this 5 or 6 cases that they just bugged me. They would continuously break their teeth and they complain about different things, clenching, grinding, and I just, I didn't know anything, so I would do the same. Oh, you're not wearing your, night guard, or what are you doing? You're too stressed. All the stuff that I hear people saying. Oh, you must not. You must be doing something. Are you using any recreational drugs? All these the stuff that you don't know what you're dealing with, they just throw at us and to ask. So, and I'm a firm believer that you learn from your failures, not from your successes. Obviously, if you have a successful case, you already knew all the stuff in there. So it's the failures that I need to figure out why I failed, and these things literally would keep me up at night. I would be waking up and I would be thinking about this 5 or 6 cases in my head, and they're just revolving. Why is this lady keep breaking these things? And it was a coincidence that I was at a meeting, and I'm sitting at a table. It was another one of these cosmetic meetings, and this guy that was sitting next to me, it's funny, it's probably from 23, 4 years ago, and I never met this guy again. But his name is still, I remember, and I remember where he practiced, because how it just sunk in. And he just saw me sitting down and quiet after watching, these people putting all these beautiful pictures. And he said, what's going on, Hamid? I said, listen, these are very nice, but, I have these cases that just, I can't figure out. And he just, in passing, said, you know what, you should take a look at this neuromuscular stuff. And, I didn't think of it that much at that point. I just put it in the back of my head, and I said, okay. I had heard about this center in Las Vegas that they were teaching this new, not so new, of course, but different philosophy, occlusal philosophy. And just so happened, within 4 or 5 months later, another good friend of mine that lives in California, he was in town, and I meet with him for dinner and this and that, and he looks at me like, what's going on? I'm like, I'm kind of bored with dentistry because I'm doing all these cases, but there's some stuff that I can't figure out and it's bothering me. And he tells me the same thing. He's like, you should take a look at that and go to this center. I'm like, oh, okay. And then that's when it clicked. I'm like, yeah, that guy told me the same thing. So I started.
So maybe they're onto something.
Yeah. So I'm like, okay. So I called there, and they're like, oh, the first thing you have to take is You have to learn how to do veneers. I'm like, buddy, I'm doing 10, 15 cases a month. I know how to do veneers. I know how to glue them on. I know how to fix these cases. I'm interested in nuts and bolts dentistry, not this flashy stuff. So they're like, no, that's the only way. So I called my friend who knew somebody in there. I'm like, this, they just don't want to let me go. So he calls the person and they're like, okay, we're going to make an exception. You can go to the first level occlusion. And I go there and by 10 a.m. my jaw is on the floor. I'm like, wow, how the hell did they not connect these dots for us in school? I mean, we studied the anatomy and physiology and neuroanatomy, but no one really connected it the way these guys had been. So it comes out to this guy, Dr. Bernard Jankelson, back in 1960. He starts and he's a prosthodontist. His wife happens to have MS, and in order to figure out, it takes her all over the world trying to figure out how to fix it, and it comes to the understanding that, hey, maybe it's her bite. And he comes up with all these, and it concurs with when Boeing was going through, United States, when they were going through a down cycle. So Boeing lets off a lot of their engineers. So he had a lot of them in his practice in Seattle. And he says, hey, you guys are not working. Do you think you can make this device for me like this? And a couple of them, they say, yeah, we can do it. We can design something. So he ends up making the very first generation of a jaw tracking device, and which, there's been multiple iteration of it. But so basically it's like, in medicine, if you look at how they used to use the stethoscope, and now wherever you go, even the rinky-dinkiest practice, they have an EKG machine, and boom, boom, as soon as you go, they connect and then they get it. So it's sort of like that, but it has been been a fight in dentistry to try to bring devices into this, because there's a certain segment of it that just fights it tooth and nail not to have it. It's like,
why?
Yeah, it's politics. It's politics. Yeah, it's better not to get into that.
Fair enough.
But so I go there and I start, and it was like a whirlwind. Took me for the next 12 years. I was going there like every couple of months to Las Vegas and taking more courses and more courses and more courses, and just like it just went in with my philosophy, because when I have something that it fails, I want to know why. So my question is not that, hey, I can fix it. Of course, anybody can fix it. Anybody can carve a crown and put that on. But the question is that why did it happen, and what do we do so that
it doesn't happen again?
Yeah, it doesn't happen to the new cap that I put for you.
How can we prevent it from
exactly?
happening
I think that's
in the first place?
Fundamental. That if you don't fix the root cause, then you have the same fate again and again.
It reminds me, when we were at dinner talking about this as well. You brought up something that really, really stuck with me, and it's, why does everybody separate healthcare and dentistry like they're not the exact same thing, right? They are like so. They are the same thing. Your dental health is your overall health, right? Why are we separating the two so much? And you were mentioning as well. I think, was it Spain or something? It's the only place where you have to go to medical school.
Correct. You go to medical school and then you go to dental.
Exactly.
So yes.
And so kind of that's got me thinking as well, right? Like, why are we looking at these things in just an isolated way? Why are we just doing Band-Aid solutions to everything, fixing the symptom and not really like what's the root cause of it, right? Correct. So, these cases, they kept you up at night. You became obsessed with kind of this, let's call it new school approach of like musculoskeletal, like the physiology of all of this, right? And so how does that then lead to you applying this in your own practice? Like, what's the next step there?
It's an evolution. It doesn't happen overnight, and it's not easy because you don't have
all the tools.
Not only tools, but you don't have another practice to look at and another person and say, oh, they did this and this, and then I should follow the same formula. You kind of have to
pave the way yourself, yeah.
Map it as you go along, right? So for me, it was that way. I have felt like I'm like this guy in the street that I have like 30 other dentists on the same strip of 41st Street, and they don't know what I do. It's a funny thing. It's I have dentists that seek my practice and come from different parts of the world to spend a week, sometimes 2, in my practice to observe and just shadow. And the guys that are like a few hundred yards away from me, they never come. They're like, this is the weird guy. There's some, he's putting some Kool-Aid in the water,
He's doing some voodoo rituals.
Yeah, it's crazy. I just had that one happen, not till I just this week talked to this lady dentist, very nice lady down the street, had a patient that she could not resolve the pain and discomfort, and the patient herself found me, came to me, and it was an occlusal problem. We made that video with T-scan, remember?
I saw it.
All right, so I did 2-3 sessions of T-scan on her, and her life was just like, oh my God, 2 years of pain and discomfort and everything, she was going bananas. So actually, end of August, I'm gonna have the guys coming in because she wants to do a testimonial and she wants to, she wrote a great review for us now. Now I understand there is difference between dentist to dentist. Before I thought everybody does the same thing, but so anyway, so it's really nice. It's life changing, and now you see why I like this better than somebody you put veneers on them and they're like, oh, but this hair, like there's just like 0.1 75 more. I'm like, hey, look at your before picture. Do you remember how you look? Now you're like splitting hair over here. But that's with those type of patients, when you give them their life back and the life without pain, it's just
that's the biggest thing. I mean, and that's what I was going to talk about next. So I'm glad you logically brought it up. You're removing pain from people's lives, and that's such a personal thing, and you're so intimately involved with that, right? You're working on people who've been in car accidents, people who have jaw TMJ issues, people who are, you're working on cases. It's not just like vanity stuff. It's like you're changing people's lives, right? If you want to just go get whatever done, like work with one of the associates or go down the street to one of the other places, right? One thing I see so clearly, having gotten to know you the past few months, is that you genuinely care like a lot about people, about the practice of removing pain from people's lives. At dinner, you mentioned as well, your family, they kind of joke about, you were saying it yourself, that your family kind of jokes like, oh, well, how many patients did you make cry today from helping them out?
One of the characteristics of people that have been in chronic pain is that we know that long-term chronic pain kind of involves and engages our limbic system. So imagine you have pain constantly, you have migraine and headache, and you have family gatherings and everybody's going, but no, you have to lay down in a room in the dark because you can't, and this is the trend, day after day, month after month, year after year. And what do you think happens to these people? They have depression, they have all kinds of, psychological signs and symptoms. But it all comes from that stress cycle. Now, sometimes genuinely I can get that stress cycle stopped, but the psychological part, we need help, and sometimes in a nice way I have to tell them that I'm not qualified for that, really. We need to see and talk and have a therapist work through this with you. Because some of them, that pattern becomes ingrained with their personality, and it's like they don't know. The pain becomes their best friend, and all of a sudden they can't let go. So sometimes I've had a couple of patients that I literally said, you need to do this, because the husband ended up leaving, the mother had cancer, and she just could not I'm like, look, from when we started to now, you were disabled. Now you're back to work. But you need to stop just thinking about this. Your mom is in the middle of cancer therapy. Your kids, you're still not spending time doing homework.
Yeah.
You don't have those pains and symptoms, you know.
It's a form of self-sabotage in a way. I think
Correct.
people find comfort in, you know, misery sometimes. I've seen that a lot.
Well, you know, unfortunately, it becomes part of their, you know,
It's like
ingrained in there.
it's a victim mentality that we see a lot, and it's oftentimes, you know, not to just completely blame the person, right?
So,
But
yeah,
you know, there's a lot to it.
So going back to making them cry is like, as soon as I sit down, I'm like, okay, let's start here. Let's tell me, how long have you had, you know, headaches? All of a sudden they start crying. Oh, it started, you know, I was 13 and, you know, it's been going on, you know, and they're 40 years old. I'm like, oh, okay. I didn't mean to make you cry, but, you know, but it happens, you know.
Yeah.
It's an emotional subject for them.
There's so many practical things you talk about in your content. And again, you know, I encourage anybody to go follow Dr. Nassery on the Real Smile pages. But I do want to talk a little bit about like some of the practical things that people can do to kind of, you know, fix themselves when it comes to, you know, breathing right, their posture, lifestyle changes, their sleep, that type of stuff, which you touch on all of these things and you do get in depth. But I'll make this about me, so I can be kind of your patient right now. Actually, I am a client of yours as well now, which is awesome. But you know, one thing I struggled with a lot. Growing up, I played football and I was always an athlete. And so I was always, you know, having kind of issues with my jaw and stuff from hitting people and whatnot. But that wasn't too big of an issue. But the biggest issue for me was actually when I really looked at it. Why is this like keep happening? Why do I keep like hurting myself? And it's because I was breathing through my mouth. So my mouth was always slack. Like I always like not like things were not like tight, right? And I was like, well, why do I breathe through my mouth? It's because I can't breathe through my nose.
Can't get enough, yeah. And that's probably true for 80% of the population in modern societies.
So talk to me about that, because my big thing was, I think it was allergies, honestly. Because the minute I moved out of Canada, like I was breathing through my nose perfectly fine.
Oh, we have our own allergy problems down here, but it depends on whether you're allergic.
I'm not sure
But still,
what it was,
you know,
yeah.
To be honest with you, like still your voice when you speak is a bit nasally.
Yeah.
So that still tells me you still do have some certain amount of, you know,
I
blockage.
definitely breathe through my mouth at night and during exercise and certain things like that. But what I like, let's first start with the breathing through your nose thing. You had this very specific tip on how you can kind of open up your nose, obviously like within reason, right? If you don't have a complete blockage or something
Correct,
like
if
that.
you have like severe septal deviation and that. So one of the things that we do have inside our nose, the cells that produce this incredible molecule, nitric oxide. You know, you're Indian heritage, so you know, in yoga, what do you think that exercise when they do the why do you think they do that?
I don't know. I always thought it was some kind of frequency.
You produce nitric oxide.
Really?
That's correct.
And that has like a calming effect or like a...
No, nitric oxide is a wonder molecule. I think I mentioned it in one of the videos we just did with. So the guys that found and described it back in 1998, 3 different laboratories, 3 different groups, they jointly won the Nobel Prize for Physiology and Medicine that year.
Okay.
So this molecule is nature's best antiviral, antibacterial. It's a vasodilator. What do they give you when you're asthmatic?
Inhalers.
Inhalers. They're steroids and what? Vasodilators.
Okay.
To open up your bronchioles.
Yeah.
So if you breathe through your nose, just that nitric oxide opens up your bronchioles. You don't need this. You look at most of the asthmatic kids, they're all mouth breathers.
I was one. I mean, I just to this day still have inhalers. I don't need them anymore.
Practice your yoga.
Yeah, okay.
Go do some-
It's all about Om. I gotta go back to my roots, man.
That's correct. That's right. That's why those old practices, Tai Chi, and they described this and they drove this into the minds of their practitioners that, hey, you got to breathe through the nose. You have to have this deep inhale. When you breathe through your mouth, you're gonna have chest rise type of, and I see it all the time. We're sitting. I love boxing, so I'm always watching, and I see guys sitting between rounds, and they're like, the trainer's like, breathe, and they're like, and it's horrible. And I'm like, guys, instead of telling them,
you need Nassery in the corner.
You need to breathe through, and you get the belly rise, because the biggest part of our lung is the lower part, not the upper part.
Yeah.
You want to get the oxygen
The
deep down there.
diaphragm moving,
And then the oxygen. And then nitric oxide, once it goes into our bloodstream, actually works like a key, because then the cells recognize the oxygen that has the nitric oxide on it and open up and pick up. How do we know that? We know people that are on CPAP, they constantly show on the pulse oximeter that they have 100% oxygenation, right?
Which is good. But
Right. Seemingly is good, right?
Should
but
be.
when they do intracellular measurements of the oxygen, it's not 100%. Because there's no nitric oxide when you shove the air with the fan into their mouth. So even though it's keeping them alive, it's not the same level of oxygenation on a cellular level.
So what do people do then if their nose just feels like it's blocked?
Well, number one, you have to first get an examination, make sure that it's not, deviation. Most of us have deviation.
I'll make it about me again. I had that. Okay, so I went to the expert. I went to multiple nose, ear, and throat specialists in Canada. Luckily, that stuff's covered over there, unlike here.
Yeah, you guys are covered over there, not like here.
But I remember, and they're like, "Yeah, no, you've got a deviated septum. You should do surgery."
And did you do it?
I did. I did do it, and it made zero difference. I was still absolutely.
Did you make an effort to become a nose breather?
I didn't even know that, how to do that, because I couldn't
the disconnect
breathe.
starts.
Yeah.
I talk with ENTs. I work with a couple of ENTs very closely, and that's the thing. I'm like, so it's like having your arm in a sling, right, all your life. And they're like, okay, we're gonna take this sling off. What's next? What do you do next?
Workout, therapy.
Therapy,
Yeah.
right? You got to get the muscles back in there. So
Yeah.
the nose and the air passageway is no different. If you don't get the patients to actually practice and tape lip and do the breathing exercises.
Yeah, none of that came with the
So what
surgery.
happens? So all day you're taking some allergens because you're going to breathe some through your nose, and the allergens sit over it. That's the other thing. We have no specific hygiene routine. We don't teach anything to our patients. How do you expect that the allergens would sit there and not cause overgrowth of the tissue? So their turbinates grows again, and then they get all clogged up again. So unless we do both, it's like the same thing that happened with me. I was like, we're doing this orthodontics, right? How many kids are getting orthodontics a year? It's a multi-billion-dollar industry, correct? Nobody sits and talks to these guys and say, hey, the reason your teeth were all crowded is that you were breathing through your mouth, your tongue was on the floor, it was never in the palate, and that's why you have crowding. So guess what happens as soon as they take the wires off? That kid still is a mouth breather, walking around with their, catching flies with their mouth. And lips and cheeks are always working. They're always going to squeeze that arch and make it. So then they say, oh, you didn't wear your retainers. That's why it went bad. That's why it's all about, now we have to do Invisalign for you. I get patients in my office that have done Invisalign. They have done braces as a kid, and then they have done Invisalign like 3 times. And I'm like, okay.
Something's not working there.
So I'm like, did anybody tell you that you're tongue-tied? No. Did anybody tell you that you need to have your lips sealed? No. Did anybody tell you that you need to be a nose breather? That's nature's own retention. That's why we find skulls from 5,000 years ago and they had perfect teeth. They didn't have better orthodontists, that's for sure. Right?
Okay, that's really interesting to hear that perspective. But I still want to go back to, okay, even if if you had told me that back then, when I literally could not breathe through my nose, like I felt like I couldn't do it, what would you tell somebody in that situation right now? Obviously, they need to see an expert. It's case by case. But
correct. I mean,
you're telling me I should have been breathing through my nose. I should have, had my tongue on the top of my mouth when resting. And at nighttime as well, I should be doing things like taping my mouth and stuff.
Again, after you make sure that your nose
you
is
can breathe through your nose.
yes.
Yeah, I couldn't. So even if I wanted to, which I really desperately did, I didn't know how. So like I've tried every nasal spray like that you could sell at a CVS. I
Did
even
you get
did
the nasal wash that I showed you?
No. I'm not talking about now.
Okay.
Now I can breathe through my nose, and I feel like most of the time I do. But back then, and I think for me personally, all I can say is maybe I had a ragweed allergy or something, because in Canada, like it's just so bad. The 4 seasons are just so bad for me. I'm really good in the heat. I love it.
We have to ask the question why, because for thousands of years humans lived in the nature. Why are we so allergic? Because maybe we have it too clean. We keep our kids too much out of nature. And
their immune systems are weak and stuff like
because,
that. Yeah.
There are new companies coming out, and there are different ways that are approaching all these allergies by actually micro introduction of the allergens to the patient, to actually giving you and getting you to your body to say, okay, these things are normal everyday things. And
it's like the concept of a vaccine, basically.
That's correct.
Yeah. Okay, I got you. So then, okay, we kind of touched on the nose. When you can, try your best to breathe through your nose and seek expert help and stuff like that.
I mean,
try, that's the first thing, right? Try to get breathing through your nose. But then you say one big pillar of content that I see, you talk about is mouth taping. I have tried this and I can't stand it. I
it's easy.
I go to bed with the tape on. I did this, I think it was like for a week and a half. I put the tape on, and without fail, every morning, without realizing it, I'd wake up and I had taken it off. I was like, man,
it's very normal. It's very normal.
So do you say just keep doing it?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I mean, did you stop getting up as a child the first time that you fell?
Yeah, no, you're right.
You keep getting up and you try again. So it's a good thing kids don't think like adults, right? Because otherwise none of them would learn how to walk.
No, that's true.
But yes, for me personally, it took me 8 months. And yes, the first month and a half, even with the nasal dilators, I gave some to the guys. I don't know if you ever use it.
Yeah.
I would wake up and I had taken it out of my nose. But you stick with it. And now I'm to the point that I don't even know it's there. Sometimes, I get up, I get ready, and my wife says, you still have that thing in your nose. I'm like, I do? Oh, okay. There is a curve of getting used to.
Yeah, what I really like is the strip. I've been putting
if it works for you.
It works for me really well, and my girlfriend can attest to this. When I put that thing on, I'm not snoring anymore.
Good.
Like, this is her saying that, not me. She could confirm this, but I'm like, okay, that means it's doing something.
Okay, so if that opens up and you can now tape and learn how to keep your tongue in the palate, because that will go, and I'm gonna promise you're gonna get another level of comfort and rest in your sleep.
And I definitely need that, because I've been kind of tracking my sleep using one of those Whoop tracker things, and it tells you how much deep sleep, REM sleep, all that sort of thing. And it's definitely not as good as I'd like it to be.
Right.
Now I think there's other factors at play there. A little bit too much partying, a little bit too much going to bed late, lifestyle stuff, right?
Of course.
But all things equal, I think having the mouth, the nose, what do you call it, dilator?
It's basically something goes and just kind of like opens up the two sides.
That or tape, like the strip, and then putting tape on your mouth can dramatically improve your
Correct.
sleep.
In simpler cases, I would say probably 70-75% of the cases, that's all they need.
Okay.
On really bad deviation cases, I highly suggest. I mean, there's a mounting evidence and research shows that kids that show deviation in septum by 7 or 8 or 9, by age 40 they have AFib.
Wow.
Atrial fibrillation. Yes. So now they know there's a big connection between all these arrhythmias that we're seeing in adult population and nasal blockage. So and they've seen it. The left ventricular size of the heart, the left ventricular hypertrophy is overworking. The good news is that when they do the nasal correction and they learn how to do that, within a year, the size of the heart goes back to normal.
Wow.
So we know these stuff. This research is out there. It's
crazy how much, like, if you draw the line back of everything, it comes back to breathing through the nose.
Listen, everything in dentistry we deal with today goes back to that.
But it's way more than just dentistry. You're talking about
Well,
heart.
of course, it's all. But I'm just
everything.
saying on the level that I deal with.
Yeah.
I of course, I'm very much into health and fitness, and I watch my diet and I exercise routinely. Those are my other hobbies, correct? And when I look at my patients, of course, I want them to live as healthy and as long as they can. So I regularly talk about this with people, and a lot of times, and sometimes with new patients, they're not ready. They're not ready for a dentist.
It's an uncomfortable conversation.
Yeah, I just had one recently. A young lady came in and as a new patient, and I think she was from some sort of affluent family from New York, but I don't care. I mean, I'm going to tell you what I see, and she just comes to me right after an exercise place, so she had exercise clothing, and so I check her, basic dentistry wise, there was nothing, but she said, I said, I do see something else, and she was like, what? I said, you have a sleep breathing problem, and she looks at me, how do you know? I said, X, Y, Z, so I go through the whole thing, and I tell her, listen, you do this, you snore. And she admits so, and it's like, and my husband and my brother have the same problem. I'm like, okay. I said, by the way, I just want to let you know, you will never lose an ounce of weight if you don't change this sleep pattern, because when you go through this sleep, you're going through parasympathetic path. You're not going sympathetic, and so she had like a medical background. She could understand what I'm talking about. So basically, we have two autonomic nervous system, right? After when you're not thinking, you're not doing things, when you fall asleep. So the autonomic nervous system gets your involuntary muscles working and makes the things go on. So parasympathetic is what? Everybody knows parasympathetic, right? That's fight or flight. So if I attack you right now, what happens to you? You're going to produce two things. You're going to produce adrenaline, and you're going to produce cortisol. Mm-hmm. Correct? Cortisol is the stress hormone, right? And that's what's responsible for you to make, like if you see people sleeping and they make these sudden moves and
I do that.
That's cortisol.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay?
I think I have a lot of that.
Why do I have to learn that? Because people that break their teeth, cortisol.
Yeah.
So if their mouth is open and it's falling back and the tongue is in the airway, the only way to save your life is for the activation or hyperactivation of the masticating muscle, so your teeth can come together and you can find the gearing and the jaw can come forward, and hopefully your airway opens up.
Whoa.
Okay, so it's a life-saving mechanism, but that clench is 20 to 25 times stronger than chewing, let's say, a steak. Wow. That's why teeth break. So, but cortisol, let's go back to that. It's like a poison that we produce inside our body. So it saves your life that moment, but it does 100.
It's like long-term damage.
Bad. It's an extremely inflammatory molecule. So let's just start with what it does to insulin production. So everything you eat is going to get stored as fat right around our midsection. It goes through our system, and we know there is connection between that and lupus, between that and irritable bowel syndrome. It passes through blood-brain barrier, so it goes to our brain. It doesn't stay out. So we know people who have early onset
Dementia. Yeah.
Mammillary bodies in the middle of brain, they have more breakdown because of that inflammatory. So there's a humongous.
Crazy.
I mean, this is a crazy molecule. You know, if you had an organ transplant, you know that people get organ transplant and they put them on a medicine. Afterwards, they have to go once a week or so, and they give them this infusion of this medicine, the anti-rejection medicine. What do you think that is?
Cortisol. It's cortisol. They're giving you stress
because it shuts down your immune system. So now you're more open to accepting a different organ, but you're also now immunocompromised, so you can catch, colds and viruses, and God forbid, something like COVID.
Wow.
So when this whole thing came up, I'm trying to tell my patients, listen, try to breathe through your nose more, because we have nitric oxide in there,
which is
antivirus, antiviral design. So some of these things are just our systems, and we just have to understand the physiology inside us better. We need to communicate these things more openly with physicians. We have to open their mind and the understanding that, hey, what we understand, what we know from on our side in dentistry, how we can hopefully help in tandem. But one of the biggest things that I have seen in 20 years is open minds is really hard to find. And unfortunately, a lot of the physicians that I approached, I do have half a dozen guys that now, after 20 years of fine looking, that I work with. But the mainstream is always a pharmaceutical. They go to the doctor, oh, you got to take this. Oh, you got to take the steroids. And nobody talks about
a tool that we all have, that we all are born with.
Things that we should fix fundamentally.
That's so interesting to me to hear that, obviously a lot of these lifestyle choices have an impact, but if you can just do this one thing that very few people even talk about, it can have a ripple effect positively on everything. And, coming up in school and everything, we're all taught to brush our teeth, we're all taught to floss, we're told the basic things, but are we really? Because the seems like the biggest thing that no one has ever, up until this last year, it's a little bit more in fashion now. People talking about the mewing, the breathing through your nose, taping mouth. It's a little bit more accepted. But growing up, you would never hear anyone talk about breathing through your nose.
This mewing, it's great, but people have completely taken it out of context.
They just want a strong looking jaw now, right?
And they think, okay, if I do 15 minutes of mewing in the morning and 15 minutes but mewing is merely an exercise to strengthen your tongue. Mm-hmm. It's the correct swallow pattern and lip seal that's critical. Why? Because you do that 2,500 times a day to swallow. So if you have the right strength, so the end game should be the correct swallow pattern. Mewing is
that's
just
the thing you were talking to me about in when we did my cleaning, right?
Right.
It's the swallow pattern, and I'm completely okay talking about this all. Right. So you notice that my tongue doesn't. I never do that because I never do. I could tell you that I never put my tongue on the roof of my mouth. But you're saying you were even teaching your hygienist, hey, look, take a look at this guy. Look, you can see that his.
So I have to teach her what to look.
Of course, I know, I love it. I'm fine with that. You're talking about what was it, the uvula or something like that? You're look, I could tell that this guy, his pattern, his tongue is definitely, he's got bad mouth posture. Talk to me about mouth posture and what are people supposed to be doing?
So the correct mouth posture or lip posture is lip seal. I see kids all the time that are
their mouth is just
sitting on the and the lips are apart, and I always tell the parents, listen, if they're not speaking, laughing, or eating, lips should be always, even during eating, we want the lips together. We don't want to eat with mouth open. So you have to emphasize those, and when parents bring their kids, first thing I tell them, listen, this only going to work if you're a helicopter parent. I'm sorry. Because parents who are
easy going,
they kind of hands off with their kids. This is not going to work. You're not going to tell a 6-year-old, okay, do this, do what the doctor said, and then when you walk out, I'm there for about 15, 20 minutes in this kid's life in once every 2 weeks. It's the parent. So a lot of our exercises are not just teaching the kid, but really is directed to teach the parent what to look for and what to ask it's kind of like those things, I don't know if you had a grandmother. Did you have a grandmother in your family at home?
Yeah, but not at home often, but yeah.
Yeah, like in the old times, the grandparents were in the home and they were the ones that they're sitting at the table. They're like, smack you one and
say,
don't put your elbow on the table.
Yeah.
Don't eat with your mouth open. We need more grandmothers. That's what I mean.
Yeah, we do. That's a really, really interesting point. Is it starts from parenting and it starts from when you're a child, right? And so there's that responsibility of a parent to kind of instill a lot of these habits early on, because if you had some of this training when you're young, it's like how you see these
set them
kids.
up. That's what my focus is with our interventional orthopedics that we do now. Trying to set these kids up, because after 20 years of dealing with TMD patients, where do you think the TMD patients come? Where do you think
they started off as...
That's it.
Yeah.
It's just those patients, like probably like 85-90% of us have this skeletal growth discrepancy because the tongue was not in there. So if everything below our eyes is supposed to grow because of the function of the tongue, and if the tongue is constantly on the floor and the kids are walking around with the mouth open and because they have allergic rhinitis and all kinds of other things. So all of our faces, we actually have unfinished business. We have unfinished growth. Mm-hmm. So now the teeth are not where they were supposed to be, but nobody gave the memo to the muscles. So muscles, they still came out where the DNA said has to go, and they want to function in a different trajectory, but the teeth are in a different trajectory. So most of us have certain amount of discrepancy.
So is that when you get underbites and overbites? That's where that comes from?
Well, yeah, those are more severe cases. So like your case is a very mild discrepancy, correct? Mm-hmm. But somebody that has a really bad overbite where the upper teeth completely covers, you don't see when they're closed, you don't see any of the lower teeth, that's a severe overbite. And then you have the underbite, which people that are class 3, they're completely, I had last week, I had a kid that they drove all the way from Orlando down to see us because the only choice they had given this 10-year-old girl, it was heartbreaking, honestly, because the mother came in with the 3 girls. So the older sister and the younger sister, they were perfectly good. The middle sister, she had this huge class 3 and concave face. So the mid face is completely underdeveloped. And as I walked in, the first thing I looked, and the kid is sitting there and breathing heavily. I can hear it. So I tell the mother, first, what are you doing? What are you doing for her breathing? What are you doing for her? She's like, she can't breathe through her nose. And then the 2 sisters turned to her mother and like, Ma, that's why she snores every night. Sometimes people just don't see what's right obvious.
In front of them. Yeah.
And the only they hadn't done anything. The dentist, and she's like, I've been taking her to dentist for 10 years, and nobody has told me all this stuff. She was tongue-tied. She was not a nose breather. Her mouth constantly open. And I said, listen, the mechanics of how when your lower teeth constantly hit in front of the upper teeth, you're never going to get bone growth there. You're going to push backwards. So in the minimum, you need to take that away, and you need to open the bite. You need to put tools in there to help mold, because we have still a little bit of window. Maybe we can help her. But it's sad to see that that type of science is just not taught. So they had gone to an orthodontist and they were like, we got to take some of her teeth out and pull this.
Oh my God. And that's so painful. And to do that to, how old was she?
Forget about that. That's just maiming.
Oh my God, yeah.
You're taking perfectly vital, The problem was not the lower jaw. The problem was the upper jaw. We need to make that grow instead of taking teeth from the good jaw. It's a funny thing. Some years back, when my girls were in elementary school, I was like, one day I was frustrated because I had a similar case, and I go home, and I said, let me ask you something. Let's say I have a guy here and he has a normal hand and a short hand. And we want to fix this guy. We want to help this guy. And I told my dogs, how do you think we should fix it? Should we take a little bit of the good hand and make it shorter, the same size as the other one, or should we try to help and make the other hand that's short bigger? And they look at me like crazy. Dad, you're nuts. Of course, we're not going to touch the good hand. I'm like, thank you. I just wanted to make sure I'm not crazy. But kids see that. But yet, as adults, I don't know. I see this all the time in our profession. These are the conflicts that I have in my head that they say, oh, it can't be done. Just because you don't know how doesn't mean that it doesn't exist.
Very true.
That's why, I study with my mentor who's I've been doing that for the last 2 years. She's
in Brazil, right?
In Brazil, yeah. I mean, she has 2 PhDs in orthopedics and bone physiology. And the stuff that I'm just learning from this lady is just amazing. It's just the science of it, how they had figured out how to stimulate without pushing, without pain, without having stiff appliances, how the body has its own mechanism for growth. It's just, unfortunately, we don't teach that here.
I've got a few questions left here before we wrap up. One question is, why do you think that, medicine as it is, here in the U.S. is not open to, these other principles, these other methods? And, you even tie in some Eastern philosophies to this stuff as well.
Right. Well, it's really not that hard to understand. I think 70 years ago, we changed, we took physiology out and it practices, whether it's dentistry or medicine, it's more of a business model.
For profit.
I hate to say it, but it is that. I talk to orthodontists and, listen, they're seeing 125 kids a day and, they just have this machine that goes through. They have 6 or 7 assistants. They really don't do anything. They just go and say, okay, change this wire to that and that, do that, this, that one.
That was my dental experience my whole life.
That's the only way you're going to see a kid every 15 minutes. Mm-hmm. And basically everybody gets that. So it's more of a business model. And, it's not, there's no way you can do the type of work that I do. My practice is a very low flow practice. And, there's no way I can see that type of flow. I can't do what they do. They can't do what I do. Because a long time ago, I decided that my practice is going to be based on providing the most logical, organic, physiologic concepts to my patients. That's where I go. I'm not interested in, having, 200 new patients. I get these guys now that you guys made me famous. I get these texts all day. I can get you 100 patients. I'm like, I don't even know what to do with 100 patients.
Yeah, and that's really, and that's so true to your philosophy, right? Is you actually, again, it comes back to it, you actually care about the people that you're treating. You care about the problem solving of it all. And I love the approach. And it comes through. Your clients love it, and I see it. I'm even sitting in the waiting room, and they're happy to pay whatever it is because they're getting their problem actually solved. They might have tried 50 things, 500 different dentists, and so that's kind of what I want to wrap this podcast up with is, I mean, we could sit here all day and dive into everything, right? But what's next? How are we going to take this message and multiply the Nassery approach, the real smile approach?
Well,
how can we get this?
Well, I've always had associates that I bring in and I start to introduce them to that way of thinking and actually putting the science. I always tell them it's the science that you study the first 2 years and learning how to actually apply it to day-to-day practice. And a lot of them are shocked at the beginning, but then once they see it, because once your eyes opens up and you see these things, you can't put that stuff and close that mind again. So we do have, as you know, I have my teaching programs that I do classes from time to time. I do bring other lecturers into town and
you do kind of seminars and stuff as well.
Seminars, yeah. But right now, I'm really focusing on really teaching and getting my associates more well versed on these type of treatments,
Yep.
and hopefully expand our brand.
I have an idea.
Yeah.
I think there needs to be a Nassery University. I think that there needs to be, you need to distill everything that you've learned into some type of course or something and a certification. Because you told me that you actually can certify people, right?
Well, I'm a what do you call it? Certified CE provider. So I'm a for AGD, or Academy of General Dentistry. I can actually give classes and give continuing education.
Start the university. I think
it is.
I think
you know how many. Do you know how many different places are? I mean, then you're going to start getting into this whole world of these different institutions that have teachings, and you get into politics. You know, one thing I've learned.
The politics.
Yes,
you don't like the politics.
No, because you know why? I've been to so many of them the last 20 years, and while I see the good part and I learned from them, I see at the end of it, they don't incorporate some of the stuff because it's not in their best interest. So everybody and I don't want to turn into that, you know.
That's true. Yeah.
I am a free agent. I'd like to get my information from a lot of different places, and wherever I think is going to benefit my patients and make my. So I don't think I want to ever just have my own teaching center and then
at least if you could package up, these seminars and things that you're doing for at least the dentists that would share your philosophy. Not, trying to convert every single dentist out there into this is the way.
This is not for everybody.
This not, right? But for the ones who are passionate about taking their clients' pain away and not just profit.
It's a very small market.
But hey, it doesn't have to be a big one, right? I mean, if you're still grassroots serving, one-to-one or small groups, that means that there's an interest out there. And so I would just challenge you, Dr. Nassery, on this podcast, because you keep me accountable. I'm thinking as well for you. If we want to get this message to as many people as possible, I think there should be something for those who are interested in this approach.
Absolutely. I've had an open door policy to any doctor for the last 20 years. And like I said at the beginning, I've had doctors fly in from Germany, from Spain, other parts of the country, and coming in and shadowing and just getting familiar. And then I tell them, take this course with this guy, take that course with that guy, take this one, and then you're going to incorporate and see how. What I find is that a lot of people are, I think you can say that about any profession. I would say 95% of people are just followers, kind of cookbook professional. You can give them, you go to hospitals right now and they have protocols. You're going to do this, and a lot of the physicians don't even think about it. They're like, oh, no, the step says we have to do this next.
Yeah.
And I see that in my field. And it's...
But you're the Dr. House to the those people.
You have to have critical thinking. And I know that in any profession, you're going to have about 5% of that professional that has critical thinking. And then you have that 0.5% that are just true visionaries, and they see that. And then those guys with the, critical thinking, they're the ones that looks out. That guy has, he figured out something. Then they follow. Those are early adopters. So I think of myself as that. I just question everything, and if something doesn't make sense to me on a physiologic level, then I'm like, there's got to be a different way.
And just to wrap this up, that just reminds me of the first day that I met you when I walk in your office. I see this big Tom Brady sign poster, and it just speaks to volumes of what you try to emulate in your...
I get a lot of, being down here in Miami Beach in Florida for the last 30 years, I get a lot of flack for that because everybody they hate New England, and but that's okay. I don't mind. I just really appreciate the excellence, the dedication to the field, and I don't care about the rest of his life. It's none of my business, obviously. But anybody that has that much dedication and that much passion for his work, it didn't hurt. That gave us, he gave us 20 great seasons.
Dr. Nassery, I really appreciate you coming on the show today. Thank you for coming on. Tell people where they can find you on social media.
Well, social media, you should better do that. I don't even know my handles and stuff yet.
Real Smile, at Real Smile. Dr. Hamid Nassery. Google him, you'll find him. He's the man. Appreciate you so much for coming on today.
Thank you for having me.